What's up, guys? Barry Game here, back with some more Idle Heroes news for August 13th, 2025. Apologies for being gone missing the past few days. Over the weekend, we literally had no internet from a thunderstorm until Monday, and then Monday happened. Kids went to school for the first day. My goodness, a stomach bug went through us, but we're good to go now, and we're going to be going over Weaver of Life IGNACIA. So, I don't necessarily know if this is going to be a main carry hero, but there's one really big silver lining, and that's the fact that she is the number 2 tenant for Sun Wukong. So if she has some really good support slash damage capabilities, this might be an actual good solid pick hero if you're maining a Sun Wukong account especially. So let's jump right into it. Let's go over her skills. She has shielding, damage, all these weird keywords that are going to be a mouthful and hard to understand, but let's jump right into it. Alright, let's take a look at this hero. She looks pretty decent, I will say. It has a lot of keywords, especially in the active skill. So let's take this step by step. Enlightenment Life Weaving active skill deals attack damage to random enemies. Again, skills like this really matter how many of those random enemies they're hitting. If self has a certain number of Seed of Light buffs when releasing the active skill, they're additionally going to do damage to targets that have another keyword constraint on them, dealing damage equal to a certain percentage of their max HP with a cap of her attack percentage, and then removes that constraint owned by the target. Besides that, attacks targets with shaping. So we have Seed of Life constraint and now shaping, dealing damage equal to a certain percentage of their lost HP, which also has a cap, and then removes shaping owned by that target as well. Afterward, again, removes all layers of Seed of Life, which was the first one, owned by self. So if you have Seed of Life, deals extra damage. If the target has constraint, they're going to take more damage. If they have shaping, they're going to take more damage. And if self is under life shaping state status after releasing the active skill, exits the life shaping state status, and if not, she enters it. So basically, just if you're not in this, you're going into it. If you already had it for the active, it gets removed. During life shaping state, there is a chance to gain several more layers when self gains Seed of Life. So extremely confusing until we actually see how this hero works out. And of course, depending on the number of targets she's hitting, that's pretty important. The first passive is called Imperishable Vein. Changes the basic attack to deals attack damage again to random enemies and inflicts that constraint debuff on them. Then grants shelf a shield equal to a certain percentage of attack. If an attack enemy has shaping, it grants self several layers of that Seed of Life that she needs for that active skill. Up to certain number of layers can be owned. So really confusing but the basic attack is how constraint gets put on. And then, of course, if they have shaping, which we haven't talked about how they get it yet, they're also going to get layers of Seed of Life. So again, very, very confusing. It goes on to say, if self has a certain number of layers of Seed of Life, additionally increases self damage reduction for several rounds. So that's kind of cool. And the constraint is just reduces the owner's attack. So you're constraining their attack value. Okay, cool, that's fine. Red Vine Connection is the next passive. When an ally releases a basic or active skill, self chases and attacks random enemies. That's usually like an assassin type thing, but cool. Dealing attack damage with a chance to inflict shaping, so that's the next keyword, on those targets. Shaping is a skill effect. The owner takes damage equal to a certain percentage of max HP at the end of each round, which is pretty cool. It's like a dot, essentially. Then, if the target already has the constraint from the basic attack, when being inflicted with shaping, self will gain several layers of Seed of Life. Up to a certain number of layers can be owned and increases self crit damage for several rounds. If self has a certain or more number of those layers of Seed of Life, when gaining Seed of Life, additionally increases your attack for several rounds, which, okay, cool. We know how we get constraint, and we know now how we get shaping, which is cool. Last passive skill, at the end of each round, if self has a certain number of those layers of Seed of Life, grants self energy, increases your all damage dealt. This effect is not stackable and will be ineffective after releasing your next active skill. If self has less than a certain number of layers, each layer then grants self a shield. So she has ways of shielding herself, dealing damage, lowering enemies' attack, buffing her own all damage dealt, and crit damage. Lots of things going on. And then finally, the core of origin. For every several layers of Seed of Life gained through Imperishable Vein, increases all allies excluding herself all damage dealt for several rounds and grants them a shield equal to a certain percentage of attack. So this sounds like one, if you're going to use like a Sun Wukong team, using her core might actually be really good because that's going to be shielding and buffing that Sun Wukong all damage dealt. Really cool. And then for every several layers of Seed of Life gained through Red Vine connection, reduces the speed of targets with constraint for several rounds and increases the crit damage taken by those targets with shaping. So really cool support type things. Being able to shield your allies with the core seems really, really important. If you're looking for I mean, this one's really cool because it works as both an offensive buff to someone like Sun Wukong on your team, which is really, really cool. And yeah, I feel like this might be a solid like number 2 character if you're going for a Sun Wukong account. Of course, her own tenants are not horrible. Williams, Natalie, it's not great, it's not amazing, but I think, like I was saying, the most important part here is the fact that it says at the same time IGNACIA is the number 2 tenant for Sun Wukong and the number 4 tenant for I think it's actually, I don't know what that translation seems a little off. I'm gonna probably say it's Patricia. It says Pasadena, I don't know. I'm gonna go with Patricia. Not sure about that 4th one, but the big part is the number 2 tenant for Sun Wukong sounds pretty promising. And again, it really comes down to not necessarily her active skill. We don't necessarily know exactly what life shaping state is going to do either, because it's really weird. Essentially, you use your active skill and then you enter life shaping state until you use another active ability and then you lose it. So it's really, really weird. But during it, there's a chance to gain several more layers of Seed of Life, which makes it kind of interesting on how the core of origin works with this too, because again, it says for every several layers, but it doesn't say there's a cap on it. If there is a cap, cool, that's fine, that makes sense. But the fact that right here it doesn't say that there's a cap, it's pretty interesting, because increasing all allies, aka your Sun Wukong's all damage dealt for several rounds and grant them a shield is pretty powerful. Usually these equal to a certain percentage attack. A lot of time ends up being the attack of the target it's going on. We don't necessarily know how that works out, but if it is, that's going to be a pretty strong shield. The big part is that all damage dealt, and then of course the fact that increasing the crit damage taken by targets with shaping is big, because that's going to pretty much ignore the 150% crit damage cap usually. It was kind of interesting. The constraint part, reducing speed, not really as important. I'm really just looking for the core of origin buffing part of it. And as it stands right now, that kind of sounds good. So let me know what you guys think about this hero. I'm intrigued to see what it's like. I was considering making a brand new account and building IGNACIA as a first E5 hero and then converting it into a first Transcendence hero. Don't know if that's actually going to work out. We're going to have to see. But of course, remember, because all of this happening, new Transcendence hero means we have a special event next week. And whether it's worth using Heroic Scrolls or not, we'll have to see. Granted, with the new store adjustments for Arena and stuff, might not be bad. We'll see. Hopefully you guys enjoy this one. Hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys next time.